Shut up, I'm wasting video time now. Shh, shh, shh. Hey guys. So I'm out here in a 17th century barn in the beautiful English countryside with my family on a little vacation. But before I left, I asked you guys on my Instagram stories whether you had any questions or concerns about university. And boy, there were a lot of responses. So I thought I'd spend 5 or 10 minutes just kind of answering some of those questions. Obviously, university is starting very soon. Some of you might be going back to university. Some of you might be starting university for the first time. So hopefully I've picked out the right questions. I've picked out the key questions that a lot of you are going to want to know about before you start architecture university. But before I do that, I think I need some tea. Okay, so the first question is by Ahad Ali. He says, how do you prepare for in-person architecture sessions compared to online learning? I've always thought you would have to think about it the other way around. I guess you just have to think about it in the sense of hopefully your university is going to allow you to go back to complete physical learning. And in that sense, I always advise people to make sure they get themselves one of these, because an iPad is like the perfect tool for a student on the go. And you can sit in your studio sessions, get your iPad out, make notes, do some drawings, do some doodles. Sometimes it's really useful for your tutor to even just get on your iPad and do a drawing, and all of your files are saved. So yeah, in terms of physical in studio sessions, I'd say get excited about that. That's the joy of university, being in that physical environment. Get yourself ready mentally, I guess, and get yourself an iPad. The next question is by NSHN. It says, how to stop over-perfecting and sticking to time limits on pieces? That's a really good question. So over-perfection is a virus in architecture school. Make sure you don't get it, because you can really get caught up in trying to do things that take absolute ages. People will spend 2-3 weeks on drawings, and I've been through that. I actually wanted to see what it was like to spend 2 or 3 weeks straight working on one drawing, just so I knew what that process was like and whether it was a good idea or not. It's a good idea if you want to create these over detailed kind of beautiful drawings, and these are just some examples of the drawings that I've done that I'm sure some of you guys have seen, and they were drawings that I spent a very long time doing because I was over perfecting them. But the thing is, that was okay in my studio because we were looking to create these standout drawings at the end, whereas a lot of studios don't really require you to do 3 or 4 drawings to that level. What they want is you to create a really beautiful portfolio of high quality work and a lot of work. So I think majority of the time you're going to need to hone in on your quick architectural skills. And by the way, that is how the real world works. In practice, you're not going to be able to spend 2 or 3 weeks on a drawing. You're actually going to be doing drawings in like a couple of hours, or at most you'd spend like a day doing a fantastic drawing that's going to be used in a meeting or a presentation. So it's a really useful time in architecture school to just make sure you're spending time learning how to do quick quality drawings and quick quality work. And if you're in that studio where actually you think, I want to do an amazing standout drawing, then fine, spend ages doing it just to get a taste of it. But then again, make sure you're working on those quick skills too. Nasushi 2002 asks, what is the jump from first year to second year like? That's such a good question, and I often say that is the hardest transition. I don't know if I'm just projecting my experience on this, but I guess that's the whole point of this video. For me, in first year, some of you might know, but I was like failing. I I really was not focused in my first year. I almost failed it. And then second year, I changed everything around. I became super focused. But what I did sense as well was there was a massive jump. Obviously, a lot of places don't grade your first year. Your first year is usually you're learning the basics, you're learning how to draw basic fundamental styles, you're learning what is an elevation, what is a plan, what is a section, how to draw it. You're often working with hand drawing, and then suddenly in second year you're faced with a whole digital world of tools, and it can be really overwhelming. So the transition from my experience is one of the hardest. I would say probably the easiest time is when you actually go to masters. And for me, I think the way I look at it is the time you know the most is the time you're struggling the least. So obviously first and second year you know almost nothing, or at least I knew almost nothing. And then when you're in masters, although a lot more is expected of you, you know way more. You know your way around a project, you know what your design process might be, you know your strengths. So yeah, I think the transition from first to second year is one of the hardest. Muhammad RAR says losing data / files and hard drives and computer errors. yeah mate, that is a fair concern to have. Make sure you're organized with your technology. I would say make sure you guys get yourself external hard drives that are dedicated for your university work, 1 terabyte at least, so that you can really organize your files. Actually, maybe not 1 terabyte at least. No, I would say 1 terabyte, because you know what? You're going to be saving Rhino files, big 3D files, and those things start to compound at the end of the day. So yeah, make sure you get yourself stuff to really organize your files, back up your files, save your files, organize your files, and hopefully when you do have computer errors and everything crashes and breaks down, you haven't lost everything. Jan Ark says, worried about where to study because my uni is partially open. Again, that's an interesting one because, studio space, as I said it previously, is one of the highlights of any university environment. I guess if you have nowhere that you can think of to study, really try to make your home environment as amazing as possible. It makes such a big difference if you can create a dedicated room with some nice lighting, organized files, folders, getting a nice mouse and keyboard and all these little things. They can really make a difference to your working environment. So I'd say if you're worried about your working environment at university, go all out on your home working environment. And if you can't do that, then go to the British Library, or go find a nice co-working space. There are loads of interesting options for alternatives to your studio space, but at the same time, I would say really pressure your university to allow you to get into the studio, because things are going to be easing up now. You're the students, your voice determines how things go in your university, so raise your voice. The next question is by Adam DM. Nice to see you, Adam. Says he's worried about being paired with a bad tutor. Yeah, this one's a difficult one because sometimes you won't even know who and what you signed up for, because when you're doing your studio selection, it can seem like an amazing studio you're signing up for, and then you get there and that tutor is some evil, narcissistic, unempathetic monster. And sometimes at universities you get some real difficult characters to deal with, and sometimes you don't get very great tutors. So I would say, even saying that, I would say don't worry about that. A lot of the time, most of the time, you're going to get a quality tutor, also, especially if you're going to a good university. And to be honest, another big value you get out of university is being able to deal with a difficult tutor. That will teach you some amazing skills in life and for practice and just for the real world. So I would say focus on your studio. Don't worry too much about whether that tutor is going to be good or bad. Obviously, do your research beforehand. Find out from previous students. I remember when I was doing my studio selection, I literally went round to everyone who was in the year above me who was selecting their new studios and said, what studio were you in before? Tell me about it. What were the tutors like? So go to the open days and, be a little spy, investigate everything. Time management, I mean, I'm not going to sit here and give you tips on time management, because you could sit and watch a podcast probably about that for like 2 hours and learn so much more. But I guess a quick tip on my end for time management, it's just make sure you have a calendar on your phone or a diary that you're logging everything into. Because if you're like me and you easily forget stuff, you need to have an anchor, something that you put all your important dates, all your important kind of reminders and tasks. And I use my my Google Calendar, which syncs up with my Apple devices and everything, and it works a treat. It can send me emails, it can send me notifications. I can customize when I get notifications, and usually if it's like a really important deadline, I'll set like 5 different notifications, 1 week before, 2 weeks before, 3 days before, an hour before the deadline. And yeah, that's like my little personal assistant, and I would be absolutely shockingly bad at that if I didn't have a calendar. The next question is starting with a weak concept. Again, I would say don't worry about this. I think at university you can get really bogged down with thinking, I need to think of my final project, or I need to think of a really strong concept straight away. And to be honest, you're most likely going to start with a really weak concept as soon as you start your course. And that's fine, that's okay. I've never seen someone, and I've tried to do it myself, I've never seen anyone who starts their university course and their project with a concept that doesn't change. It will always change, and it will change drastically, and that's good. You need to be able to have a good grasp of concept development and learning how to deal with changing your ideas. So embrace the changing ideas, embrace the weak concepts, and fortify them with time and with, good discussions with your peers and your tutors. Vibu asks, is it worth it? Is architecture university worth it? Oh, God, that's a deep question trying and answer. I would say yes. Yeah. At the end of the day, if you've made it this far, it's going to be worth it. If you are in your part 1 and you finished your first year or second year and you really feel this is not for you, then I would say there's more of a reason for you to drop out. If you're somebody who's made it past your bachelor's, you've got your part 1 and you're starting your part 2, stick with it. Really just stick with it. It will be worth it in the end. Having a master's does put you a lot further ahead of people, but at the same time, in the world we're living in, you could do so many amazing things just with your bachelor's if you wanted to. For people who are very strong workers and take risks, I think just with a part 1 or just with your bachelor's, you could do amazing things and be really successful. Make sure you check out episode 2 from my podcast with Adam Nathaniel Furman to know about someone who did that. He dropped out of architecture school after the bachelor's and is now like an award-winning designer, making headlines every other day. He's just, he's killing it. Okay, so next question is by Very Berry, who asks, what would you suggest for new architecture students? If you're completely new to architecture education, my advice to you would be, don't get overwhelmed, because you can easily get overwhelmed with how much there is to learn and how much there is to get specialized in. I remember thinking when I was starting university, like, how the hell do I navigate myself around learning about modernism, learning about, the different styles of architecture, or learning about, parametric, cutting-edge, futuristic design, or learning about humanistic, social side of design or architecture. There's so many crazy things which you can just get lost in and overwhelmed with. I think my advice to people who are starting university is to say, don't get too bogged down or focused or concerned about learning everything. Just enjoy the process. If you are interested in learning about the history of vernacular architecture in the UK, enjoy it. If you get bored of it and then you start to get interested about parametric coding and script, then go with that. Go where the wind takes you in architecture, especially in the early stages. You have so much time to get passionate about something if you really want to, and then specialize. That would be my key advice for new students. The next question is by Larabe Afreen, who says, would you prefer a university student to start their Insta page to display their selective work? Really good question. I've said this before. If you're an architecture student, if you've just started, or if you're, part 1 or even part 2, make sure you've got an Instagram page showcasing all of your work. I've only been able to build this online presence and social media kind of following because I did that. I did that very early. I think around second year or so, I started sharing my work on Instagram, tagging all the big pages, using all the hashtags, being really consistent, and I was producing work outside of my course just because I loved to try different drawing styles. I was never super talented at doing award-winning drawings or anything, but one thing I was good at was doing a little bit of everything. So if I saw someone who was doing these beautiful sketches of, architectural, experimental elevations, I would say, I want to try that. And I'd go and try it. And I'd learn how to do it to a basic level and get kind of good at it and then just share it. So I was always passionate about drawing in the early stages, and I needed my Instagram page to share that passion with everyone. And it ended up doing so much good for me. Even your potential job employers will go to your Instagram page and look at your work. I highly recommend people creating a Instagram portfolio page. And I even say to people, having a personal page where you share all your kind of, personal information and, all sorts of other things can be, well, at least for me, it's not very attractive for me to go around doing that. But having a professional page where I know, okay, if I'm spending an hour on Instagram every day, I'm not going to feel bad because I feel like I'm doing something quite productive with it. So yeah, I'd say it definitely makes a difference to have an Instagram page. Leave a comment if you want me to do another video about how to do a good Instagram page and give you guidance on that, because that could be a whole video just in of itself. Matthias Agvik says, which habits should you start practicing? This is a great question. I think before you start university, you're going to need to be very good with your time management and your organization. You're going to need to be very good at creating a routine for your day. My number one advice to people who are starting is to say, get an idea of when your deadlines are. Look at your course structure and find out where all the deadlines are, all the course kind of highlights are, and mentally prepare yourself and add all of those dates into your calendar, as I kind of mentioned before. Once you do that, you'll have a really good grasp on what your year is going to be like. Once you know that, you can then start to visualize what your daily routine is going to be like. So for example, you might realize during the entire week, I'm going to need to get into university early in the morning, go and do my work, and maybe then I'm going to make sure I do all my work at university in the weekdays and enjoy my weekends. And every now and then on the weekend, I might do some hand drawing for a particular piece. My advice would be to get in the habit of structuring your days, structuring kind of your mental preparedness of what your course requires of you. I would also say it's a really great habit to start practicing how to do, as I've kind of mentioned again, how to do quick drawings. So that's the beauty of having an iPad. You can be in that process, you can be in that habit of just doing your drawings quickly on your iPad, and and then you can quickly move to the next iteration. Being able to draw fast, iterate quickly, and move to the next thing is so important. It's a very important habit to get down in architecture school, because as I said earlier, you're going to be evolving, you're going to be developing your concepts, and in my opinion, the more that concept develops and evolves, and the more you chisel away at it and refine your ideas, the stronger that concept is going to get. And finally, another great habit to have is to go into InDesign and start structuring out your portfolio early. So I literally mean, when you start your course, you should start to think about your final portfolio. And what I mean by that is just in terms of the template. So go into InDesign, make a title page, maybe get a format template that you know you're going to put your title there, your captions here, images here, for the development side of things, the research side of things, and then there's going to be final pages with all your standout drawings. I saw people do that, and I did the same thing, and it saves you so much stress. It's a very, very good habit to be able to organize everything early on. Lou Jane Kelani asks, if you had to choose between the AA school and the Bartlett, which would you choose and why? So obviously they're very different schools. I would highly recommend you listen to episode 3 of my podcast, Two Worlds Design, which you can find in the playlist or link in the description. It's actually my most watched podcast episode with Eric Wong, who is, an award-winning Bartlett student who basically unveils everything about the Bartlett and the drawing culture and how the university is, basically. So the Bartlett is obviously a very highly competitive school. It's one of the best schools in the world, highly regarded everywhere you go. So you're going to get that image on your CV by going to the Bartlett. People are going to look at you in a slightly different way. Some people are going to look at you in a very judgy way, because that's just the way the world is. People kind of envy those people who go to the Bartlett. They also have preconceptions about the Bartlett people being a certain way. This is just part of the competitive nature of our field and our academic system. So I would highly recommend you apply to the Bartlett, because like I said, if you get into the Bartlett, it's going to do wonders for your CV and for your job opportunities. I actually didn't end up applying to the Bartlett. I wish I did. I ended up just applying to 2 or 3 schools, and for personal reasons, I was going through a lot and I couldn't go through the process of applying to another university. It was just too much work for me at the time. But in hindsight, I wish I did. The AA School of Architecture, again, it's a huge school, highly regarded, globally renowned. Obviously, the big names went to the AA. As far as I know, the AA is a private university, so you're going to need to pay a slightly higher fees, even if you're a home student. I could be wrong, but the AA again is outstanding. As far as I know, it's going to have some of the highest level facilities. The best tutors around the world are going to be teaching there. It's going to have a slightly different style of work. Obviously, you guys know that the Bartlett there's going to be studios where you're exploring extremely fantastical and right on the edge concepts, experimental, crazy things, whereas the AA, I think, is going to be slightly more academic and theoretical in the things they do. They obviously have a huge department when it comes to parametric design. I think the AADRL is a kind of research lab at the AA which does amazing things. I think Patrick Schumacher sometimes comes and visits. So both incredible schools. I would say if I had to choose, I would choose the Bartlett myself, but that's because I lean more towards really enjoying the storytelling and the narrative side of architecture. But if you're somebody who loves the things I mentioned about the AA, and you love the kind of theoretical, experimental, parametric, and being around some of the biggest names in architecture, AA is an amazing school as well. Here's the last question by Tom Gardner, who asks, due to COVID, I've taken 3 years out as opposed to 2 before starting my master's. The time out has taught me many skills and expanded my knowledge, but I've completely forgotten what university is like and feel out of touch. My worry is adjusting from professional environment to academia again. Any tips? I would say, I had this slight worry, but I was only out of university for 1 year. What's really strange is going from this environment of being really constrained, real world thinking, practical aspects, and all these kind of logistical, bureaucratic things. That adjustment can be difficult, but I think I would be really excited if I were you, because you're going to jump straight in the deep end of wholehearted self-indulgence and kind of being lost in your own world. That's going to be so fun, but you're right, it's going to be slightly intimidating and slightly scary to go straight into that. I would say embrace it, enjoy it. And in terms of adjusting, I think you'll adjust pretty quickly because you've done your part 1, you're going to have all that muscle memory, and actually a lot of the skills that you learn in your job are going to come into a lot of good use in your projects as well. So I would say the adjustment is not as bad as you might think it is. Alright guys, hopefully that answered all your questions and gave you a bit more hope before you start architecture university. If you have any other questions, leave a comment down below. As always, make sure you're subscribed, go and check out my podcast and all the other videos on my channel, and I guess see you in the next video.